Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev, where today we continue working on our super retro take on Minecraft. Now last time we started adding more features to the game, including water, a jumping mechanic, and basic interactivity between the player and the world. Not all of it worked exactly as we were hoping, but it was a nice start. And fun fact, put us arguably on par with where we left off the last time we'd attempted a 2D side-scrolling Minecraft. So today we will try to push beyond that par to new pars and beyond. Our first order of business will be to try fixing the jump code from last time. Next, we'll look into inventory management by translating Minecraft's inventory system to something more fitting of our retro aesthetic. And finally, we'll take some time to look back at why everything we do today failed. That's right, spoiler alert, today's episode doesn't go so well, but there's still some things that could be learned. So let's not waste any more time and get to the coding. Today's episode is going to be less about session highlights and more about explaining the thought process throughout, starting with the first attempt at the jumping code, which was to make the player's jump time independent of the rest of the world. Because unless I tied when a player could jump to the world ticker, there would always be desync between the jump timing and gravity kicking in. So in the player control, I tried to restrict up movement to first check for a solid tile below. However, no matter what I tried, one of two problems arose. Either the player would immediately drop back to the ground, nullifying the entire jump timer, or the player could continue jumping while in the air, despite the added restrictions. I should note that it's been a long time since I wrote any platforming code from scratch. Add to that, I'm not working with actual collisions but tiles on a grid, and the fact that everything is based on timers and not frames, I was indeed overwhelmed with the best way to approach this. The controls were also giving me problems. Usually my controls are written on a per key basis, but as we've done for this project, movement is all handled through a constant loop. So I think despite my best attempts to rein things in with conditionals, I would have benefited from a more traditional approach to movement control. And the cherry on top of the whole thing was the fact I tried working with previous code that wasn't even up to snuff to begin with. The existing code hardly even worked, and so I should have just redone everything from scratch. The silver lining, however, is that through sheer brute force and stubbornness, we almost ended up with a working jump system. Jump time would dictate how long the player could ignore gravity, and horizontal movement was still applicable. There are issues regarding the transition from water to solid flooring, and the player can still jump in the air if they mash the jump key, but it's getting there. And I now have a better idea of what it'll take to get this working properly in the future. But for now, I needed a break, so it was time to focus on the inventory code. I went with a DS list here instead of a DS grid. Now, I've replicated Minecraft's inventory/crafting system before, but I wanted to try something different here. However, for the sake of keeping things consistent, I still drew the list as a grid. The idea here was an inventory system like in Minecraft wouldn't have been possible back in the day, so a simple list of nested arrays seemed like a good alternative. Check the list for existing resource. If it exists, add to that entry, and if not, place resource in first available blank entry. Two scripts were set up to accomplish this. The check script would return the DS list position of an existing resource, and depending on the return value of that check, the add script would, well, add resources where necessary. It seemed pretty straightforward, but it turned out to be a lot more difficult to pull off than I thought. I am almost positive I overthought this thing to like a crazy degree. While I could have used DS maps here to make things easier, I wasn't sure how to handle multiple resources of the same type, when one reaches max capacity. But the main issue that kept popping up was the loss of information between the check script and the add script. Though I could definitely return a value through the check script, the add code would not recognize the nested array. And I think given how overwhelmed I was during the jump code attempt, I just wasn't able to concentrate. So I called it a day. And I think that's the main takeaway from this session. Originally I had planned to scrap this 3-hour session of failed attempts, but I think it's important that we showcase both successes and failures here on Let's Dev. Sometimes you're just gonna have bad days where nothing you do works, but it's okay. It's important to not be discouraged by the idea of a lack in progression. And remember that your failure doesn't mean it's the end. You can always come back at a later date, fresh-faced and rejuvenated, and try again. I definitely recognize I was not on my A game here. Not only was I still recovering from sickness, but I'm also very distracted with the state of the real world, which makes it hard to concentrate when dealing with some pretty crazy intricate stuff. Not to mention, properly recreating retro aesthetics is a lot harder than I thought it'd be. All I can really hope for is a smoother, more successful attempt next time. And even if next time is yet another failure, it's still okay. So hopefully, if you've ever felt discouraged by not being able to code something on your first or second or 100th try, you realize that you're not alone and it's all part of the developer experience. And with that said, brings us to the end of today's out of the ordinary episode of Let's Dev. So leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and leave your own code mishap stories in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.